So today, we're going through 1 Timothy again, and now we're up to chapter 3, and today Paul is going to be sharing with his disciple Timothy about the qualifications for church leadership. In the spirit of that, I thought I'd open with some job postings that I saw recently that I think you'll enjoy. This was for a school bus driver. They had just one tagline and then a phone number to call. You'll never take your work home with you. In fact, it would be illegal. This was for a pizza cook. Apply today. Qualifications, and they have 3 of them. Number 1, not be a crybaby. Number 2, masters in SYM. And then I didn't know what that was, so helpfully they had it in parentheses, a master in shut your mouth. And number 3, able to read your schedule. Then this was for a toy store. We are hiring, low pay, bad hours, jerk boss, apply now. This was a winery. Wanted, grape stompers, must have good balance and large feet. Skinny folk need not apply. This was for an evil genius job position. Evil genius seeks minions to sacrifice their lives in world domination attempt. Must be prepared to work 24/7 for fascist psychopath for close to no pay. Messy death inevitable, but costumes and laser death rays provided. No weirdos, all caps. Call 1-800. Yeah. It's like, I don't know who would apply for that other than a weirdo. Finally, call 1-800-MWA. H-A-H-A. Mwahaha. This one was my personal favorite, a classified ad. I am quite sure most of you have seen the rather large green dragon that has been flying over northeast Oklahoma City for the better part of a week. I am looking for someone to lure said dragon away from Oklahoma City to a more rural area, force said dragon to land in rural area. Slay said dragon in whatever way you see fit. No pay, as dragon slaying is its own reward. Please note that I am not talking about the red dragon that frequents the area from time to time. He and I have an agreement. So there you go, yeah. So in the spirit of talking about the qualifications for church elders and deacons, I thought that would be fun. 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1. Paul, writing to Timothy, says, here is a trustworthy saying, whoever aspires to be an overseer desires a noble task. Now the overseer is to be above reproach, faithful to his wife, temperate, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not given to drunkenness, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own family well and see that his children obey him, and he must do so in a manner worthy of full respect. If anyone does not know how to manage his own family, how can he take care of God's church? He must not be a recent convert, or he may become conceited and fall under the same judgment as the devil. He must also have a good reputation with outsiders so that he will not fall into disgrace and into the devil's trap. So earlier, chapter 2, Paul talked about his expectations of how men and women should behave in the church. Now he shifts to church leadership, and he starts off talking about the elders. What are the qualifications for elders? Who can be an elder? The word elder, when it appears in the Bible, there's two different Greek words that are generally applicable to the word elder. And sometimes they may be translated elder, sometimes they're translated overseer, bishop. The first Greek word is episkopes, the second one is presbyteros. Episkopes, it's a Greek word that comes from the business world. It's made up of 2 different words, epi and skopeo. Epi means over or above, and skopeo, we use that word. That word is in our modern English words like telescope, microscope. Let's go scope it out. So skopeo means to look at intently. So it's 2 words, over and look at intently. It's an overseer, one who looks over others, one who supervises, a foreman, a manager. So that's the word that Paul uses here in 1 Timothy when he's talking about an elder. And there's the other word, presbyteros. It literally just means an older, more mature man. It's a word taken from the Jewish world. Like the elders of the 12 tribes of Israel will have a say in Israel. The synagogue was set up like that. It was ruled by older, more mature men, elders. And so the church followed a similar thing. And so both of these words mean the same exact thing. And it's kind of funny because you have church streams and denominations that have looked at these two different words, and they've built a whole understanding of church leadership based on these two different words, when the two words and their understanding of church structure are completely different from each other, and yet the words are the same thing. At their root, they're two words that mean the same function. Like Episcopalian churches say that one man, a bishop, an episcope, leads the church effectively. And then you have Presbyterian churches that say a board of elders lead the church. And then the third form is congregational style church leadership, where the whole church functions like a democracy. Everybody just votes on what they want to do. But these words, episkopes and presbyteros, they mean the same thing. And so it's humorous to me that you have these church denominations that have said, no, we're based on Episcopalian form of government. We're based on Presbyterian form. Well, those are the same word effectively in the Greek. In Acts 20 and Titus 1, yeah, please silence your cell phones and keep your hands within the vehicle. So in Acts 20 and Titus 1, Paul uses both of these words interchangeably to talk about the same function. And so they're two words that mean the same thing. They mean an elder, or in modern American English, we'd call it a pastor, even though the biblical term for what we call a pastor in America, it would be an elder, or overseer, you could call it, or old man. So Brian and I are old men. Yay. We did, yeah. Facebook told us that we were old because we know good music. Yeah, it was this video he sent me. If you know these 12 songs, or however many songs, you're officially old. And I'm like, okay, yeah, we're going through them. We know all of them. And I sent Brian back, it's not our fault that modern music sucks so bad. It's so true. All right, so Paul starts off writing to Timothy saying that if anybody desires to be an elder, it's a noble task. Why do you think Paul told Timothy that it's a noble task to desire to be an elder? Well, I have two reasons that I think that he told that to Timothy. First one, the world generally does not see the role of an elder as a noble task. While Eastern Europe was under communism, pastors, elders, were forced out to quit their jobs or forced underground and forced to get separate jobs because the whole culture said, well, that's a wasted use of an individual. You could be building pieces of a car. You could be designing roads. You could be teaching kids. You could be a doctor. But instead, all you do is study some ancient myths and legends and deceive other people with ideas of religion and spirituality and all these things, and you teach once a week, and what do you really do? You're just wasting space, wasting time. And so they closed down churches, forced pastors out of their jobs, and the world did not look approvingly on pastors, on the role of elders. In my own life, I've experienced this, and I know Brian's shared some stories as well. Like people have told me, get a real job. You don't really work. You should get a real job. I'm like, okay, you don't understand being a pastor. You don't think this is real work. Or people have joked, yeah, wouldn't that be, or they've said, I would love to have a job where all I have to do is work for a couple hours Sunday morning and that's it, and I get paid. Like, you don't understand being an elder at all. My own dad has asked me, he'll call me up and say, hey, are you working today? I'm like, Dad, I work like every day pretty much. That's being an elder, it's like pretty much all the time. You're kind of on call. And if I want, I could carve time out, but you're ready to go all the time. So even in my life, I've experienced it, that people generally, the world does not appreciate and understand the role of an elder. And so I think, I can't imagine that it was any better in Paul and Timothy's day when people didn't know what the church was. It was brand new. They understood priests and temples. They understood the synagogue system somewhat. The Jews would understand that. But the church, what is this? To be an overseer over a group of pseudo-Jewish people? Like, what is this? So I can't imagine that the elders that Timothy would set in and that Paul would set in. The church would get it, that these guys are critical. They're helping guide us and shepherd us. But the rest of the world would look at him and go, what are you doing? I don't understand that. So I think one reason that Paul emphasizes it, says it clearly to Timothy, hey, it's a noble task, is because the culture wouldn't appreciate it. And then secondly, I think the reality is that being an elder is not easy. It's a very difficult task. You lay your life down for people that are a lot of times, and obviously not you guys are perfect, but other pastors lay their lives on for other people that are stubborn and unteachable, ungrateful, unthankful, very hard to work with. And like, you guys are awesome, and I really do mean that. I don't consider you guys that way. I think we've weeded out, for better or worse, those who are ungrateful, unteachable, and hard to work with are not around anymore. But many pastors, the rate of depression among pastors is huge because they work. I was telling somebody about it this past week, even Sunday mornings, I share my heart for 40. Oh, I was talking at the youth group about it. I don't know how it came up, but we'll preach for between 45 minutes, hour 15, depending on, what happens. But that 45 minutes, let's say an hour. That hour comes from not dozens, well, maybe, sometimes it comes from dozens of hours. Yeah, it very well could, of prayer, reading articles, reading the Bible, studying the scriptures, meditating on this stuff, listening to other sermons, reading commentaries. I could spend 20, 30, 40 hours on prep work, and then I come here Sunday, and 45 minutes, share my heart, and people go, I didn't really like that one joke you told. Like, wow, that's hard. It's really hard. And, it's part of the cost of being an elder. At least they were listening. I know, right? Yeah, then you get the other one where the people just, they look at you glaze-eyed, and they leave, and they're like, I don't know what we talked about. What did we do at church? It's like I entered this time warp, and you went blah, 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 and then I just left. I'm hungry. It's hard. Or you might have someone come to your church, you lay their life down for them, you pray with them, they get started in ministry, they're serving, and they say, I love this church, I'm never leaving. And then a month later, they get mad, get offended, and they never come back and won't even answer your phone calls or text messages. And you're like, what did I do? We don't know what happened. Or someone comes to your church, you do deliverance with them, you disciple them, you pray with them, you raise them up, you raise money to build them a house. These are all examples of things that have happened to me. You build them a house, and then they get offended because you won't force the worship leader to do their favorite song during worship, and so they cuss you out in front of the whole church and tell you, get out of my effing country. That happened in Romania to us, in front of my church and family. Somebody, I did deliverance with him, spent hours and hours counseling him, doing deliverance with him, and then he got offended because I read a Rick Warren book one time, and so he said I was working for the Antichrist, and he went and talked to other churches around and told them, Jake's working for the Antichrist because he read a Rick Warren book. Okay. Another guy who got offended because I spoke in tongues, and he knew I spoke in tongues when he started coming to the church, but he was there for a couple of years, got offended. But suddenly, I don't know why, but all of a sudden he got offended about it, that I spoke in tongues, and said that was from the devil. And so he started going around to other churches saying that don't let Jake come around. And I was blacklisted in Romania from various churches. They wouldn't let me come around anymore. Or people that, I had this recently, somebody got offended a couple of years ago because he wanted to talk about, he was coming to the church, he was smoking pot, and he came to me and he's like, hey, would you let me share in front of the whole church about how smoking pot has really delivered me from a lot of anxiety? And I told him in a very nice way, I said, let me pray about it. But my first reaction is, I don't feel like that would be a good fit for us. I feel like that's a very nice, gentle answer, right? I could have laughed at him and said, no, moron. I gave a nice response. Well, then he ends up calling me back and cursing our church out and saying, you will be small and destroyed. No one will love you. No one will come to your church. No one will grow. You will never be blessed. Just curses our church because I refused to let him talk about how smoking pot set him free. No, I'm not going to do that. That's ridiculous. It's going to hurt people, not going to help people. It's not the word of God. Or someone left because I told him that he shouldn't be sleeping around with his girlfriend and he shouldn't be doing drugs. And he had some warrants out for his arrest, and I told him you need to confess to the cops that you got offended. Well, that's what he should do. He should stop sleeping around, stop doing drugs, confess to the cops what you did. He got offended, he leaves. It's like, well, I'm sorry. Like, we can't but speak the truth. And so the role of an elder, it's not easy. Brian and I and other pastors, we try to love you, we try to teach you, we try to grow you, we're trying to shepherd you because we care about you. And then you guys are good, you're here. But like the flack we get from people is so hard. And so I think one of the reasons Paul tells Timothy it's a noble task is because, one, the world doesn't generally appreciate it. And two, it generally doesn't feel like it's a noble task. It feels like hard work, and you feel like you're mistreated, elder abuse. And you wonder, why did I sign up for this? I could work in a yogurt shop just making yogurt, and we put sprinkles on. Everybody's happy. Work at Wienerlicious. Oh boy, if you have not seen the Chuck TV series it's old, I don't know, 10 years old or something, more than that. It's really funny. The first couple of years especially are funny. It's not Christian, and there's some things in it that I'm like, oh, okay, that was a little inappropriate, but it's not as bad as most of the stuff out there nowadays. But it's very funny. And there's some good lessons in there about starting 80s rock bands. Chester. So Paul is telling Timothy, despite how the world may treat you and your elders you set in, despite how you may feel about it, it's a noble task. And then he goes through some of the expectations of elders in the church. But before we go into them, as we go through them, you'll notice that the emphasis on these qualifications, or maybe you noticed it already, or maybe you've heard it already, or thought through it already. The emphasis is not on skill, not on talent, not on giftedness necessarily, not on personality. The emphasis is on character quality. And the second thing I want to point out before we go in, on the one hand, these attributes are really things that everybody should aspire to. Paul says, hey, this is what elders should be like, but really it's what everybody should aspire to. And maybe you noticed that as we read through it, you're like, well, yeah, I want to be like that. I want to be like that. Ooh, I got to change that. It's really for all of us. And so but then on the other hand, these attributes, these character qualities are in many ways so lofty that it would be hard for anybody to meet them perfectly every time. It's a standard. This is what we're aiming for. This is what we want the elders to be like. Are we always going to get it? No. But this is the standard that we're aiming for. And it's a standard that all of us should ultimately aim for. It's good stuff. So as we go through them, and I want to say that this is the standard, but elders may not know. Jesus will get it perfect. Paul was probably pretty good. But other than that, we're gonna miss the mark once in a while. We're still human, but that's the standard that we're aiming for. So as we go through it, go easy on the pastors, the elders, I'm not talking about Brian and I. We're perfect. We get it. Other pastors at other churches. No, we need mercy too. A lot of it. I was going through these and I'm like, are you sure, God, I should be an elder? So when I was young, I remember, being a member in the church, and I remember, I remember aspiring to be an elder. I thought that would be cool, Little did I know. No, I remember feeling this call from God. I want to be an elder someday. And I remember when I was younger feeling like it doesn't seem that hard. Now that I am an elder, have been an elder for a while, I'm like, God, are you sure I'm ready? Are you sure I'm old enough? Do I have this figured out yet? No, I don't. But God, it's hard work. It's just hard work. And hopefully, you make mistakes. And usually you realize that after the fact, or you would not be doing the mistake. But you grow, you learn, you figure it out. People are difficult to work with, and I am a people. So I'm part of that. All right, so to go through these, it says an elder should be above reproach. Other translations say blameless. It literally means nothing to take hold upon. That when you look at an elder, there should be no sin in his life that you can grab a hold of, that you can point to, grab a hold of, and make an accusation against him. And again, this should be said of every believer. It's not, you shouldn't be able to have we should not have the attitude, my elder has to be above reproach, but I can do whatever I want. And that's another thing that's difficult about being an elder, is because people do have that attitude and have told me that to my face. Well, you can't, I can do this because I'm not a pastor. You're a pastor. You're not allowed to make a joke like that. Well, wait a minute. If it's sin for me, it's sin for you. We should all aspire to be above reproach. This is something Joe and I, on our way to the video game arcade yesterday, the guys, for those who were in a cave yesterday and didn't know, the guys, a bunch of us went out down to Chicago to the world's largest arcade. And on our drive down there, Joe and I were talking about, he was bringing up some ministry leaders that he knows, that this guy's on his third wife, and he was in jail for 10 years for tax evasion, and his wives, there's allegations, rumors that look probably credible, that the guy is just very difficult to be married to and possibly was an abuser, abused his wife and kids. It's like, this guy should not be an elder. He's not above reproach. So, okay, I guess he's not an elder. He just started a ministry. Well, I don't think he should be in ministry. But for sure, no room for him to be an elder. Second thing, faithful to his wife. Other translations say the husband of one wife. And some scholars say that this should be understood as a one-woman man. Essentially, if you're married, you're faithful to your wife. You don't check out the girls at the beach. You don't flirt with the girls at your office. You're not looking at porn, other girls, other women online, that you are faithful to your wife. And if you're not married, same. You're faithful. You're not flirting with the girls at the office. You're not checking out girls at the beach. You're not looking at women pornography online. That whether you're married or you're unmarried, that you're faithful, that you remain pure in your heart. Now, some questions that this brings up in my mind are, does this mean that someone must be married to be an elder? And some people would say, yeah, there are churches that teach that, which is funny because then there are other churches, denominations like the Catholics, that teach that priests cannot be married. So, you've got the whole spectrum there. I don't think this means that you have to be married to be an elder. I think there are some reasons it can be useful to be married, but I don't personally think this means you have to be married to be an elder. One big reason is that if you must be married in order to be an elder, then Paul could not be an elder, and Jesus himself could not be an elder. And I would hate to be that church that Jesus applies to be a pastor there. The board gets together. We don't have a board, but and they go, this guy looks good, but he's not married. Sorry, Jesus, you can't be our pastor. It's like, okay. Right, what if you're a widower? You were married, you're not anymore. Sorry, out of luck. Yeah, so there's a lot of reasons where I say, well, I think this would not, I don't think this says that you have to be married to be an elder. Another question that it brings up is, does this mean that a man who has been divorced and remarried shouldn't be an elder? Because it says a one-woman man, faithful to his wife, the husband of one wife. So if you're married, she divorced you out of your control, you did nothing wrong, and then later you got remarried, can you be an elder? Well, there I would say maybe not, because it could be an indicator. This would not be a deal breaker for me personally, but it could be an indicator. If you can't make your marriage work, how are you going to make the church work? If you couldn't get your natural family functioning well, how can you make the spiritual family function well? So it's not necessarily, in my mind, okay, you got divorced and remarried, you can't be an elder. But it's you got divorced and remarried, what happened? Why? What's the deeper problem there? Because it could point at something that would mean maybe you shouldn't be an elder. Now, what about a man that has multiple wives? Or like what was, that happens not here. Well, not at this church. I don't know. Maybe there's like some Mormon churches or something where it's going on. It does happen in other countries. In Africa, that's something they were dealing with, guys that would get saved. They had, like Muslim guys have 3-4 wives, they get saved. Can he be an elder? If he's mature, he loves God, could he be an elder one day? It was definitely happening in Paul's day. The common thing in the Greek and Roman world was that a man would have his wife, and then he would have a concubine, and then he would have a prostitute, and that was just kind of normal. Could that guy, could he be an elder? And then there were others that had multiple legitimate wives as well. Could they be elders? I would say no. I don't think so, because the elder is supposed to be held up as, this is the standard. This is what we want. Do you always get that? No. But the standard in the Christian life is one man and one woman married for life. The standard is not one man and a concubine and a prostitute, or one man and 3 wives. So I would say, no, if a man has multiple wives, no, he can't be an elder, because you're holding up a lower standard. All right, the next thing here is temperate. The word literally means sober. What is sober? Not drunk. That's what the word literally means, that an elder should not be drunk. But it's used in a metaphorical sense, meaning calm. And in the root of the word in Greek is calm. That in his mind, in his attitude, in his emotions, he's temperate, he's calm, not wild mood swings, not erratic. You think of the temperate climate zone. Temperate climate like the U.S. and Europe, it's known for moderate temperatures, known for moderate rainfall, mild kind of climate, as opposed to places like the Arctic, not known for mild, moderate temperatures, or the Sahara deserts. Temperate, not too hot, not too cold. So elders can be lukewarm. Spit out of Jesus' mouth. Temperate in heart, temperate in attitude. You know, you think of someone who is drunk. They're not mild-mannered. They're not calm. You don't know what's going to happen from a drunk person. They're going to be erratic and wild and crazy, do stuff that doesn't make sense. They might be really happy, dance on the table, put a lampshade on their head, sing and dance. They might fall on the floor. They might crack silly jokes. They might go running up and down the street, tripping over themselves. Or they might get violent and angry and start howling at the moon and breaking stuff. They might fall on the ground sobbing and crying about how they were raised. They might sit in the corner stewing and brooding all night, drunk texting their pastor. You know, when you're drunk, you do crazy stuff. You're not dependable. And so the idea that Paul is getting at here is that a pastor, an elder, should be somebody who's temperate, who's mild, who's calm, who's steady, who's stable, that you can depend on. Next one he has here is self-controlled, that an elder should have control of himself in all aspects of his life. I've known pastors who can't control themselves around food, that they see food and they're like, I gotta get it in my belly, man. And then you watch them eat and it's like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of food. There's countries that I've been to, Romania and some places in Africa, where the fatter the pastor is, the more he's respected. And like they want fat pastors. That sounds like, what is that? Austin Powers. Fat pastors. So obviously he doesn't have self-control, and and it's not necessarily a weight issue. You could have somebody that's skinny and has a high metabolism, and they can't control themselves. They see the cookies and they just got to eat them, but their metabolism's high enough so you don't notice. You got to have self-control over your urges, your bodily desires, self-control over your emotions, that you don't have these wild mood swings. One day you're depressed, the next day you're really happy, and then you want to cuss at God, and then you want to shoot yourself, and then you're like, everything's great, and everything's awesome. You don't have self-control over your emotions. I've known pastors that don't have self-control over their thought life, that they always feel insecure, wondering what people are thinking about them, worried about what's going to happen. They're full of fear and doubt and unbelief, and they haven't controlled their thought life. Pastors that sleep in way too much or stay up way too late at night and haven't controlled their schedule. The idea is that an elder should have self-control over every aspect of his life. Proverbs 16:32 says, better a patient person than a warrior, one with self-control than one who takes a city. That's the goal. That's the aim. And obviously, no one's perfect. No, there are no perfect elders. You're going to have some variation in that, but that's what we aim for in the elders. And also, again, it should be no different for anybody in the church. Respectable. The word is kosmios. This came up last week when Paul talked about how the women should dress, that they should dress kosmios, so that they should dress respectably. The word means well-ordered, put together. An elder's life shouldn't be a mess. You shouldn't look at his life and go, wait, you want to teach me how to live? Your family's nuts. Your finances are not in order. You're cussing up a storm. You're always getting angry. And you want to try to help me? You want to help shepherd me in this Christian walk? Your life is a mess. It's not put together. An elder's life should be respectable, put together, well-ordered, Had a guy come up to me a couple of years ago, ask me, he's a great guy, he loved God, but his life was kind of a mess. It was a big mess. But he came up to me, he's like, hey, what do you think about me being an elder someday? And part of what I told him was, well, okay, your life is not in order yet. You don't listen to counsel. You are sleeping around. You're smoking pot. You're not really faithful to come to church. So you got a gifting. I could see you one day being an elder, but you got to get your life in order first. That's kind of the point. You don't want someone else, someone whose life is a mess, trying to guide you in life, or the blind will lead the blind. You both fall into a pit together. Then next he's got here hospitable. In the Greek, it means a lover of strangers. 1 Peter 4, chapter 4, verse 8, Peter writes about all believers that we should have this quality. He says, above all, love each other deeply because love covers over a multitude of sins. Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. Our homes and our hearts should be open to each other. It looks like the early church, so there's a book, an old extra-biblical writing called The Shepherd of Hermas that was written, I think it's in the 2nd century, after the New Testament was finished, after all those letters were written and distributed. And in there it talks about that an elder should be hospitable in receiving teachers, traveling ministers into his home. And so it looks like the early church probably emphasized it in that sense, because you had traveling ministers that would go around, and then they can't just stay at the local Super 8. They would stay in the homes of church members. And so the recommendation was, pastors, elders, you need to open your homes to these traveling ministers, the ones that are preaching the true gospel. But ultimately, really, it's, we don't have that situation in our church. Once in a while, we've had missionaries come. Like Dave Miller came, he stayed at our house. Marius came, stayed at Richard and Kathy's house. And I know, we have that heart, that if there are traveling ministers and people that come, they can come and stay with us. That Brian and I have no problem with that. But it's just not an issue as much anymore. But in all areas, each one of us, the elders in particular, Paul says here, but each one of us should have our hearts opened up to each other, our lives opened up, our homes opened up, that what I have, you guys can use it. If you need, ask me. Don't just come over, walk into my garage and try to hotwire my car, Ask me. I may need it. And when you come, you can come to our house. You're welcome to come to our house, and I know Brian and Kathy would say the same. You can always come to our house. Just let us know ahead of time so we can make sure that we're there, because we're often not, and make sure that certain individuals have their pants on for the day. Jack. That they're fully clothed and in their right mind, before you show up. What's that? At least fully clothed. Yeah, the right mind, I don't know. No guarantees on that one. Then he says that elders should be able to teach. This is the one and only skill that is required of elders. All the rest of them are character issues. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 2, Paul tells Timothy, and the things that you have heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to reliable people who will also be qualified to teach others also. Sorry, that's a different version. Who will also be qualified to teach others is the NIV. The requirement on elders is that they are able to teach. The requirement is not that elders have to be the world's best theologians to awe and inspire you with our mighty intellect and our incredible speaking skills. So you go, wow, that guy is highly educated. The requirement is that we are able to teach so that we can make disciples. There are a lot of churches where I think the elders essentially tickle the people's ears with all the neat, intricate details of everything, all the theological stuff that they've picked up. And that's interesting. You can learn some really good stuff, and it might even change your life. But it's not going to necessarily make strong disciples. The Bible is about making disciples. Jesus was about making disciples. Jesus didn't walk around trying to impress everybody with how great of an orator he was, how eloquent he was, how many big words he used to talk to people. He actually used very simple stories with a lot of depth to them, and direct statements, jokes. using humor to get the point across. Normal people could understand him. Normal people liked hanging around with him. He wasn't some highfalutin intellectual that impressed the Greek scholars and philosophers. But he made disciples, and that's the point. That's the goal of elders teaching, is that we are able to teach you what we've been taught. The requirement is not that your elders are the best teachers or even your favorite teachers. You can go on YouTube, and I hope you can find teachers that you think are better communicators than me or Brian. We're not trying to impress you with our communication skills. Hopefully we can get the point across and teach you guys as well as we can, but there are plenty of teachers better than us. There's plenty of people who know more, who know the Greek and studied the Greek and the Hebrew and all that, and all the history and all. You could find guys that could teach you interesting information way better than I could. But we're trying to make disciples out of you. We're trying to teach you what we've been taught. So the requirement over elders is that they can teach. Not that they be your favorite teachers or your best teachers, not necessarily that they're dynamic, funny, entertaining speakers, not necessarily that they're powerful, charismatic leaders, but that they are able to teach. We may not have all the answers. We may not have degrees from a seminary. Neither of those are requirements. The requirement is that we're able to teach because we want to make disciples. It says, not given to drunkenness. This is an interesting one. In the New Testament, in the Greek, there's another word that's used for drunkenness, and it literally means drunkenness. That's not the word that's used here. The word that's used here for not given to drunkenness, well, the multiple words that are used there, it's basically two words together, well, three. Not, and a word that means close to or nearby, and the word wine. Nearby and wine put together to be one word in this Greek word. And so an elder should not be close to wine. And I think what Paul is alluding to here is not specifically calling out drunkenness, but he's talking about elders should not, some versions say, not be given to wine. That alcohol should not have our hearts. That shouldn't be what we're pursuing. Whether you get drunk or not, is that what you live for? I know people, Christians, friends of mine, that every time I get together with them, they're telling me about, oh man, you know what beers they had at that brewery the other night? Oh my gosh, it was so good. And I spent $50 on this bottle of whiskey. It's from 1892. Oh, it's so good, man. That would probably be more than $50 from 1892. And that's their life. That's what they love. I don't see them getting that excited about Jesus. I don't see them getting that excited about their family. But their thing is they love the alcohol. They're all excited about all this stuff. It gets really disturbing to me where I think of all the hipster pastors I know that were brewing their own beer, and they know all the IPAs, and they're so excited about the new list of beers at the tavern next door. And I'm like, okay, maybe you're not getting drunk. That's good. You shouldn't get drunk. But it feels like your heart, that alcohol has your heart. You're way too excited about that. And I'm not the judge. I know I'm the judge over my heart. I know where I'm at, and I know but you have to be the judge over your own heart. And so Paul says that we should not be near to wine. Now, and there are some people that take that. I was listening to a sermon this week. The guy said, well, that means a pastor shouldn't have a glass of wine, shouldn't even hold it because he's nearby to it. I don't think that at all. I think it means having his heart. I think Paul is alluding to in Proverbs, Proverbs 23, talks about those who linger long over the wine. I think that's what he's talking about, that your heart is for that thing. That's what you're living for. That's a problem. I don't think he's specifically talking about drunkenness. It's about a heart issue there. Does that make sense? And I think there are appropriate times. It can be a very appropriate thing for anybody, for an elder or for anybody, to have a glass of wine, to have a bottle of beer. There have been times, and I have... I'll have a bottle of beer like once every couple months or so. I like beer. I don't know. It doesn't feel like this is the right time a lot of times. But there's times where I'm like, man, I've worked hard all day. It's hot. It'd be nice to just sit down with my wife and we drink a bottle of beer. And I'm like, okay, now I can relax and I think about God. Everything's good. And, so there can be appropriate times for that. And there can be some even health benefits to wine or to alcohol. But it's the temperance thing, that you're not going to just guzzle it. And your heart is not in that. And again, and it's not even just wine, not even just alcohol in general. Well, what about coffee? And all the pastors are like, I got to get my coffee. Like, well, or sugar, or all these other things that can addict you, that you don't have that self-control over your life. All right, then he goes, not violent. That pastors aren't bullies. And, obviously you don't want a pastor that's literally violent, going around kicking people and slapping people, trying to get them to follow Jesus, slapping Jesus into them. But I think it goes deeper than that. There's a lot of people in authority use their authority to push people around. You hear about it in the business world, different CEOs that are cussing out their staff, CEOs or politicians that are cussing out their staff and are domineering and pushy. And unfortunately, you also hear about it in the church world. And usually it's a big scandal. You hear about different pastors that are like that. And I would say that he's being a violent man, even though maybe he's not punching people. The word in the Greek here means a brawler, a fighter, a striker. But that maybe you're not literally punching people, but you're acting like that emotionally, verbally around them. That you shouldn't be a bully. All right, let's go to gentle. Gentle's the next one he's got here. Not violent, not a bully, but gentle, calm. Again, elders, we have to shepherd the flock of sheep, God's flock. And you can't have a shepherd that is pushing the sheep around, knocking the sheep over, going, look at you kicking your legs there. Too much fur on you, huh? Well, a shepherd has to be gentle, calm, lead the sheep. He cares for the sheep. He watches over the sheep. You can't have someone that's harsh with them. Peter, I don't remember where it was, but one of Peter's letters, he contrasts the person who is gentle with a person who is harsh. And I think that even goes for, preaching the word and the expectation of living for God. That, there's a place, like you could have, Elijah standing before the prophets of Baal. And I don't think he was very gentle with the prophets of Baal. He's mocking them. And eventually, after their God doesn't answer, and then Yahweh answers, then he stirs the people up to slaughter them. Not a very gentle response. But there is a time for God can use people that are not gentle to do something powerful for his kingdom. I don't think Peter Cartwright was necessarily the most gentle guy. Smith Wigglesworth, maybe in his private life was gentle, but he's slapping people to get them healed and punching people to get them healed. Doesn't seem like a real gentle type thing. You might have in your temperament where God will say, all right, I got to use you to bust through this wall. I got to use you to break this down. I got to use you to confront this evil right now. And I think there's times where certain positions and roles that can work. But if your position in the kingdom of God is you're caring over the sheep, you can't treat them that way. That's not a time to do that. What I'm trying to communicate is that there are times where God can use someone in a non-gentle way to accomplish something that needs to be done forcefully. That can't happen with pastors, not over the sheep. There may be times where a pastor who's guarding the sheep sees a wolf come, and he can't be gentle with that wolf. Now you got to defend the sheep and take the wolf out, scare the wolf away. And there have been times where we've had to kick people out of our churches that were like that. I remember, back when Jesse and I were engaged, we had this guy, Rabbi Joseph, he called himself, that was coming around to our church in Madison, and he was preaching that you had to follow all the Old Testament laws. And he was being very abrasive about it. He would go to share a testimony, and then he'd go from his testimony to now he's just rebuking the church for not being Jewish. And he would go behind the leadership's back and try to convert people to Judaism, basically. And he would be condemning toward people. And one time he was at my house, and he was condemning Jesse for not following Old Testament Jewish laws. And I got in his face. He was a big guy. And I'm like, I don't remember what I said, but I forced him out of our house. I'm like, don't come around here again. You can't be doing that. It's not allowed. So there are times when you're taking care of the sheep that, you can't be gentle to the enemies. And you don't be gentle to the devil, But with caring for the sheep, you got to walk in gentleness, not beat them up, not be a bully about it. Next, he says, not quarrelsome. That elders shouldn't always be fighting, bickering, arguing about everything, unless it's grammar rules. Then Jesus understands. Not a lover of money. An elder shouldn't be greedy. This is one that our culture, I think, does not get it right. You could think of all the different pastors that lead these big churches filled with people that are making $30,000, $40,000, maybe $50,000 a year, and the pastors are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and they have massive properties, mansions, and yachts, and airplanes, and things. You go, I think somebody's greedy for money here. There are three things that you see over and over again: taking out elders, taking out ministers. The three G's: gold, glory, and girls. Those can't have a pastor's heart. They can't. If you're going to be an elder, you can't be drawn to gold. I mean, yeah, everybody likes gold. Everybody likes money. Everybody needs money, but that can't be the thing you're pursuing. You can't be pursuing other women. You have your wife. Okay, that's good. You can't have girls in every city. Glory, you can't be lusting for power and fame and respect. 1 Timothy chapter 6, a few chapters after this one, Paul writes to Timothy, "For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil." Money itself is not evil. Money, you can do much good with money, but if you love money, that's the root of a lot of evil that can result from it. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. So how do you overcome a love of money? You know, this is not just for pastors and elders. This is for everybody, ultimately. How do you overcome a love of money? You be generous. You give your money away, and suddenly that idol breaks in your heart. Then we got verse 4, he must manage his own family well and see that his children obey him, and he must do so in a manner worthy of full respect. Other translations say in a manner worthy of dignity, worthy of honor. The root word is awe, like A-W-E, awe and majesty, that people should look at an elder and his family and how he's raising his family, and they should be in awe. Wow, look at his kids in order. Look at his wife loving him and submitting to him. Look at him leading in gentleness and wisdom. That they shouldn't look at him and go, oh, ugh. And unfortunately, I think this is one thing that, again, is very much overlooked in American churches. The stereotype of PKs, pastors' kids, is all too true in many churches. You know, thankfully, I think our churches have been otherwise for the most part. We really try we want the elders to have good families, strong families that love Jesus. You know, if a man can't lead his own family well, how is he going to lead the family of God? And so one of the ways to look at, a really good indicator of if someone could possibly be an elder, look at their family. If their family loves God, their family's in order, the kids love the dad loves the dad loves the wife, loves the kids, everything seems good and at peace. You know, there's going to be problems. Nobody's perfect. There's going to be issues. But if you look at the family and go, that looks good. Okay, well, maybe he could be an elder. If you look at the family and it creeps you out and things are messed up, no, don't let him be over the family of God. He says, not a recent convert, or he may become conceited and fall under the same judgment as the devil. Recent convert is the Greek word neophytos. It's where we get neophyte from. It means newly planted. You shouldn't be shepherding other people if you don't know where to lead them. If you don't know what you're doing, well, then you shouldn't be over other people. And he says, otherwise you may become conceited. If you're given too much authority too early on, it goes to your head, and pride comes before the fall, and so you're setting someone up for failure if you set them as an elder too early in their Christian walk. And then he says that they could fall under the same judgment as the devil. Well, what is the devil's judgment? What's the judgment of the devil? Well, he was originally judged. He couldn't be in the presence of God. He was cast down to the earth, sentenced to be here in misery. And then ultimately, then Jesus defeated him, stomped his head, and ultimately one day he's being cast into the lake of fire. Do you want to condemn someone to that? Okay, set them into that as an elder too early. You don't want to condemn them to that. Wait, let them develop maturity. Let them get some godly character first. 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 22, Paul tells Timothy, do not be hasty in the laying on of hands, and do not share in the sins of others. Don't commission someone too early to be an elder or to launch out in a ministry or something. Let them develop godly character first, and godly character takes time. You can learn skills pretty quickly. You can't gain godly character quickly. You have to be pushed down a little bit. You have to mess up and repent and forgive, make mistakes. You have to grow. You have to be beat up a little bit before you eventually surrender and you develop that godly character. And still, your whole life long, you're going to be growing in it. Now, interesting thing, so I mentioned that this list is the ideal. You're not going to always hit it. And in fact, Paul himself did not always follow this. When he was in Galatia on his first missionary journey, he sat in elders that seemed to have been newly converted a few months ago. He goes to the churches, or he goes through the area, he preaches, and then as he comes back, he puts in elders. It's like it seems like they were believers for just a few months. So there are certain situations where it's like, well, this is all we have, and you seem good, you seem mature, we'll set you in. The Jesus People movement, same kind of thing, where you had a lot of these hippies that there was one guy who was following Jesus for 3 months. Everybody else just met God like a week or two ago, and they go, you know what? You're mature. You're an older believer. You're an elder. You set them in, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. But that's the ideal, is that they would be not new converts. Last one, qualification: he must have a good reputation with outsiders so that he will not fall into disgrace and into the devil's trap. The word disgrace that's used here, it's an interesting word that it means, sometimes it's translated insult, reproach, revile. It's the personal feeling of being disgraced. It doesn't necessarily mean you did anything disgraceful, but it's the feeling, the shame that comes on you of other people perceiving you as having done something disgraceful. You feel bad. Usually, that's the emphasis, is how you feel about it. Every other time that this word is used in the New Testament, it means one specific thing. The disgrace that we are willing to bear for Jesus' sake. The insults, the mocking, the criticism that you take. Well, it could be either the disgrace that Jesus bore on the cross, or the disgrace that we're willing to bear with him because we follow him. It's used in a positive sense every other time, except for this time. So what I think Paul is trying to say here is like, look, you're going to have people mock you, mock the church, criticize the church, attack the church, bring disgrace on the church for illegitimate things, just because you love Jesus. Don't put in an elder who's going to bring more upon you. Don't be foolish to put somebody in that has a bad reputation, and everybody else goes, oh, that's what the church is about? You know, if there's a guy that's known for ripping people off at his business, don't put him in as an elder. You'll bring extra disgrace on the church. If he's known for, oh, he's the neighbor that always yells at the kids because they walk on his lawn and he freaks out at them, okay, probably shouldn't have him as an elder. If he's known for sitting on his front porch in his boxers drinking whiskey and shooting shotguns at cars, don't put him in as an elder. Maybe he could be an evangelist. You draw a crowd. So he should be of good reputation, so that the church doesn't fall in disgrace. Now Paul gets into the qualifications of deacons, and this is going to go a lot faster because a lot of them, they're actually very similar to his qualifications over the elders. So what are deacons? How do they differ from elders? Where did this all start? Well, in the beginning, when the church was first started, the apostles did everything. They did the spiritual ministry. They prayed. They led people to the Lord. They preached. They taught. They also did more of the administrative stuff. They handled the distribution of money. When people came, they brought the proceeds to the apostles' feet. The apostles distributed it to the poor, so everybody had everything they needed. They handled feeding the poor, the widows and that didn't have food. They took care of that. But there came a point where the apostles couldn't do it all. They were getting burnt out. They weren't doing a good job because it was too much for just the apostles to handle, and so then they established the deacons. Acts chapter 6, verse 2. So the 12 gathered all the disciples together and said, "It would not be right for us to neglect the ministry of the word of God in order to wait on tables. Brothers and sisters, choose 7 men from among you who are known to be full of the Spirit and wisdom. We will turn this responsibility over to them, and will give our attention to prayer and the ministry of the word." So the apostles and the people effectively selected 7 men, Philip, Stephen, and 5 other guys, to take care of distributing the food to the widows so that the apostles could focus on what they were called to do, ministering to the people, spiritually spending time with God, hearing from God, teaching the people so that they can actually grow in the ways of God. Because the apostles had spent time with Jesus. The regular people maybe had seen him here or there, or had spent a little time with him, but they didn't have the bulk of time that the apostles had spent. And so then the apostles could focus on their ministry because the deacons, these 7 guys, were focusing on their ministry. So not only were these 7 guys, they were doing good work. They were feeding the widows. And like Stephen, you can hear about Stephen preaching in power and seeing signs and wonders. And then Philip, too, he goes over to Samaria and sees revival in Samaria. So they're doing an incredible work in and of itself. But not only did they do this work and get credit for that, but because they took this burden off the apostles, now the apostles can do the work that they're called to do. That's at the heart of what the deacons do. The deacons, they do great work in themselves. Like Greg's our deacon here right now. We used to have Scott as well. And Greg takes care of the lawn. Greg takes care of the walkways, taking care of the snow and all that, and various things on the building and the sound and stuff. Greg handles all that. And it's awesome what Greg does. But there's an added benefit to the entire church. Because Greg is doing that, Brian and I don't have to do it. And we can focus more on God. And we can focus more on our ministry. Now, on the flip side, if the deacons aren't doing what they're called to do, if the deacons go, you know what? I don't need to change the light bulbs. I don't need to make sure the floors are swept. I don't need to make sure the chairs are straightened. I don't need to take care of the coffee, the sound, whatever it is. If the deacons are shirking their responsibility, who does it fall on? It falls on the elders. And now the elders are doing 2 jobs, and they're already burdened with their job, and now they're burdened with an extra job. So, and then because of that, the elders get burnt out, and the church suffers because they don't receive the ministry that the elders are called to give them and should be giving them. And so early on, the apostles were doing everything, and then they realized we can't do everything. Let's set in these guys. They'll handle the administrative tasks of the church body, and we'll handle the spiritual tasks that we got to do. And the church, so the whole church could be blessed. If the deacons would have, if Stephen and Philip and those guys would have shirked their responsibilities, the elders would have been burnt, the apostles would have been burnt out, and they couldn't do their ministry. And then the church wouldn't grow as they should. Plus, the widows would still be frustrated, and they would still be hungry. So deacons do their job, apostles do their job, everybody's happy. So that's how it started, and then as the church grew and expanded and left beyond Jerusalem, that pattern was adopted wherever the church expanded to. Rather than apostles handling the spiritual function, spiritual ministry of the church, elders seem to have taken up that function. I mean, there are times where before the elders are in place, the apostles handle that. Like Paul going into a city, and he's going to feed them spiritually and handle the spiritual ministry of the church, but then he'll put in elders to take over for him. And the deacons effectively do what the 7 were doing. They handle the practical ministry of the church. So verse 8, qualifications for deacons. In the same way, deacons are to be worthy of respect, sincere, not indulging in much wine, and not pursuing dishonest gain. They must keep hold of the deep truths of the faith with a clear conscience. They must first be tested, and then if there is nothing against them, let them serve as deacons. In the same way, the women, and now there's some question, does this word could mean the deacons' wives, or it could mean women in the church in general, or, and this is the one that I think makes the most sense in context, it could mean women deacons. In the same way, the women, probably women deacons, are to be worthy of respect, not malicious talkers, but temperate and trustworthy in everything. And then now it goes back to the men again. A deacon must be faithful to his wife and must manage his children and his household well. Those who have served well gain an excellent standing and great assurance in their faith in Christ Jesus. The word deacon in Greek is diakonos. It literally just means servant. There are 2 words that are translated servant in the Bible. One is more akin to a slave, doulos, and the other one is a servant. That's diakonos. And so it's this common word for, one of the common words for servant that's used in Greek. It's made up of 2 words, thoroughly and dusty, put together to combine a word. Deacons are thoroughly dusty. Where they think it came from is, so it's connected to the verb dioko, which means to hurry after, to pursue. They think it's this idea, the commentator A.T. Robertson says about it, that diakonos means to kick up dust as one running an errand. That's what deacons do. They see something, they go, all right, let's get it done. Okay, the building needs painting, I'll figure out how we can get it painted. I don't know, we got to change the electrical over here. All right, I'll get it done. We got to make sure the snow is taken care of. All right, I'll get it done. They're kicking up dust, kicking up snow, whatever got to be kicked up, because they're hurrying around trying to get this stuff done so that the elders can do their work. Okay, so as we go through this list of deacons, and one of the things you'll notice is that it's very similar to the qualifications for the elders, with the notable exception that the deacons they don't have to be able to teach. Can they teach? Sure. Can they have a skill of teaching? Sure, but it's not one of the requirements to be a deacon. They should know the truth and grab a hold of the truth, understand what they've been taught, but they don't have to be very good at teaching others. They just got to be really good at getting stuff done. But these qualifications are there's very little difference between what God expects of the deacons and the elders. And I think this is an important thing because a lot of times we can have this perception in our heads, well, the elders, they're special. The pastors are different. There's a different expectation. Well, yes and no. We'll be held to a higher standard, and we'll be held accountable for the authority we have, the care that we give to those that God gives us. But, the deacons, the qualifications, the character qualifications are the same, effectively the same. And those are things that we should all aspire to. Worthy of respect. It's this word, dignified, honorable. Paul said that the elders should lead their families in a way that's dignified, honorable, worthy of respect. The deacons should have that in their lives, that you should look at them, and rather than going, oh, what is wrong with his life? They should be good role models that you could hold up and say, yeah, you should be a Christian like him. Sincere. The word literally means not double-tongued, that they're honest, that they're genuine, they're not hypocrites. They say what they mean, and they mean what they say. The deacon is not somebody who will tell you one thing and then go tell you the opposite or go do the opposite of it, that you can trust what he says. Not indulging in much wine, very similar to what Paul says about the elders. Although, in saying not indulging in much wine, it could mean that, hey, it's okay for a deacon to enjoy drinking a little more. I don't know. But it does say much wine here. The elders don't be close to wine. So maybe it's a little less strict for the deacons. But I'm not sure. It's unclear what exactly he means, other than it's very similar to what he says for the elders. Not pursuing dishonest gain. Again, same thing he says about the elders. They must keep hold of the deep truths of the faith with a clear conscience. So deacons don't necessarily need to be able to teach, but they do need to be able to be taught, to understand the gospel, understand what the word says, and live it. 1 Timothy 1:5, Paul used the same word when here he says, the goal of this command is love, which comes from a pure heart and a good conscience and a sincere faith. That they are living genuinely before God, have a clear conscience before God, and they understand the basics of the gospel. They must first be tested, and then if there is nothing against them, let them serve as deacons, same as the elders. We don't want to put anybody in that position before they've developed godly character, or it will hurt them. Then we'll jump past the section about the women deacons. It says a deacon must be faithful to his wife and must manage his children and his household well. Basically the same thing that he told the elders. And then the women deacons, so in Romans 16:1, Paul commends Phoebe and calls her a deacon of the church in Cenchrea. So we know there was at least one female deacon in the early church. The Bible does not have a problem with women deacons because women deacons are not leading the entire church. They don't have governmental authority over the entire church. They have authority delegated to them by the elders to accomplish a certain function, fill a certain role so that the elders can do their job. The Bible doesn't have a problem with that. So the Bible is not the Bible doesn't have a problem with women doing ministry. The Bible's only issue is if women take over leadership of the entire church. And so Phoebe is one of the women deacons that we see. And then Paul highlights some specific requirements for the women. Some of them are the same as he says about the men or about the elders, but the two different ones that he has here are not malicious talkers. That's the word diabolos, where I'm sure you can see where that comes from. Diabolical, the devil. It literally means, it means the devil, and slanderer is in the Greek, because the devil he slanders us. He says lies to us and lies about us and lies to us about God and about other people. Way back in the garden, he was slandering the name of God. That's what he does. He lies. He slanders people. So one of the requirements of women deacons is that they not be slanderers. They don't be devils. That you don't pick the woman that's known for her gossip. You don't go, oh, she would be really great to set in ministry. I don't care how many good skills she has, how talented she is, how much she can get done. If she's known for gossip and slander, you don't want her to be a deacon. And in pointing out, in specifically talking about the women here, Paul is not saying, but you guys can be devils if you want to. No. Just the women needed to hear this. The second one he says specifically about the women here is trustworthy, and elsewhere this word is translated faithful. It's the same word that Paul used in 2 Timothy 2:2, telling Timothy to grab faithful men who would be able to teach others also. You want someone who, if you ask them to do it, they're going to do it. And again, just because Paul says this about the women deacons here doesn't mean the men deacons get to go, sweet, I don't have to be faithful. No, you got to be faithful too. And just because you're not a deacon, the elders, doesn't say that about the elders. We got to be faithful. No, everybody. And even whether you're a deacon, female deacon, male deacon, elder, non-elder, doesn't matter. Everybody should be faithful. That's what we should aspire to. Verse 13, those who have served well gain an excellent standing and great assurance in their faith in Christ Jesus. God honors those who serve well as deacons. There's a reward for their hard work. And to this, Greg says, amen. It's not easy work. Just like the elders work hard in the spiritual matters of the church. The deacons work hard in the practical, physical matters of the church. I was here in studying this, I heard about some churches that their deacons do so much. More than we've tended to do here. Well, in the past, like when we had two deacons, the deacons were able to do a little bit more. With one, we don't want to overload Greg with too much. But some of these churches, they had teams of deacons that each one had a small group of people that they had to take care of their practical needs. Like make sure, okay, how are your finances? Are you making your bills? How's your house doing? Is there anything that you need work on that I need to try to figure out a team of people that can come and change your roof or paint the kitchen? What do you need? And they would handle the finances of the church, handle the building and all the practical stuff. So the pastors could care for the spiritual needs of the people, worry about, okay, is your marriage falling apart? Okay, let's counsel you. Let's build your family to be strong. Very cool. And I think ultimately that's the goal, is that the deacons handle all the practical functions of the church. Now, when you have just one deacon and he's working full time, we can't overload Greg with everything, unfortunately, as much as I would like to. We got to keep Greg forever, But maybe you're hearing this and you're like, I could be a deacon. Okay, that's a great thing to aspire to. Talk to us. Pray over it. Aim for that. All right, but it's an honorable thing, and you gain a reward. You gain an excellent standing and great assurance. And God, what this tells me, too, is God considers the role of deacons as very important. It's not that God's perspective is not, oh, those elders are cool. They've got the highest calling. Deacons, we'll let them do the stuff that needs to get done, but it's not that important. No, God really honors and values the work that the deacons do. Every part of it is important. And the deacons' work is doubly important because if the deacons don't do their work, well, then the pastors can't do their work. The elders can't do their work because they're doing double work then. So what is the difference then between elders and deacons? Well, both of them, there are a lot of similarities. Both of them, the emphasis on the qualifications is character, not skill, not talent, not giftedness, not personality. The emphasis is on character qualities. And many of those character qualities were exactly the same or very similar. So the difference is elders care for the spiritual needs of the church family, while deacons care for the practical, physical needs of the church family. Elders teach the truths of the gospel. Deacons know and hold on to the truths of the gospel. But other than that, it's very similar roles. I guess you could say elders, too. You could say elders have a gift of leading the church. Deacons have a gift of serving in the church is another division that you could see. Verse 14, moving on from here, Paul says, although I hope to come to you soon, I am writing you these instructions so that if I am delayed, you will know how people ought to conduct themselves in God's household, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and foundation of the truth. When you're building a business, you can decide how you want to build it, how you want to staff it, what kind of people you look for. When you're building God's house, God's household, God's family, God's kingdom, you do it with his plan. The reason we're committed to elders having these qualifications, deacons having these qualifications, men behaving a certain way, women behaving a certain way, is not because Brian and I got together or we got together with Michael and we said, hey, what do you think would be cool for this church? No, it's because this is what God said. He tells us what he wants his household to look like. And so we're going to build according to his plan. It's not because we're being creative and we came up with these things. If we were coming up with it, we maybe would have different ideas. But we for sure would, because we're not God and we're not as smart as he is. But this is what God said, so we're going to do what God said. And guess what? It works better when you do what God said. And he calls the church the pillar and foundation of the truth. What do pillars do? They hold up the roof, right? Or hold up the floor. What does the foundation do? Holds up the building. So if a pillar decides, I don't like being a pillar. I don't like holding up this roof. I want to stand out in the sun. That'd be kind of fun. Well, what's going to happen to the roof? It's going to collapse. If a foundation decides, I don't really like holding up the building. This isn't really fun. It gets distracted. It just wants to be a nice, pretty-looking rock out in the open. Well, the building collapses. That obviously couldn't happen. If the church, that is the pillar of the truth, that is the foundation of the truth, if the church decides we're not really into pursuing the truth anymore, what is truth? Everybody has their own truth. It's really abrasive nowadays, really divisive to stick to the truth in the Bible. So we're not really going to talk about that. What happens to the truth? The truth looks like it crumbles. The truth is harder to find. The truth is hard. If the people that are supposed to be holding up the truth aren't holding it up, it's hard for people looking for the truth to find it. And it looks like a jumbled mess. And I think that's one of the reasons our world is in such a problem today, and doesn't know basic things about what is a man, what is a woman, what is right, what is wrong. That murdering babies in the womb is evil. That's wrong. Why are there people that think that's okay? They know it's a child, and they're like, well, I don't know. It's a woman's right to choose, It's her body. It's not her body. It's a human being in there. You can't murder a human being. I don't care how old they are or how young they are. It's not okay. Euthanasia. Why is that? Why are people confused about that nowadays and think it's okay to take old people and send them to the doctor to be murdered rather than treating them because it's cheaper? Why is that a debate? Why is it not understood that these things are wrong? Because the church is not holding up the truth. The church has not been the pillar of the truth. They haven't been the foundation of the truth, so the truth crumbles. The truth is what it is, but it looks like the truth crumbles, and those who are looking for the truth are just seeing a mess rather than the truth held up and say, look, this is it. This is the truth. Walk in it. So we, as the church, we got to be committed to the truth, and that's why we'll preach what the Word says, and that's why we'll build things as God said, because it's the truth. And you may not like it. The world may not understand it. People might say you're backwards. Well, women should be pastors. Well, why do you say the man should lead in the home? Maybe the wife should lead in the home. What's wrong with that? Why are you misogynist? Why are you this? Why are you that? Everybody should lead in the church. We shouldn't have elders and deacons. Let everybody do what they want. We're just all the flock of God together. Why should you even be a part of a church? Just do what you want. Just love God, hang out with Christians, and go get coffee with people. That's church now. Why are we committed to this stuff? Because that's what God said. It's the truth, and so we're going to keep holding it up. If we don't, the truth, people who want the truth won't be able to find it. And then verse 16, Paul closes with what most scholars think was an ancient Christian hymn here, something he heard on Caleb, probably. What is it? Positive, encouraging, safe for the whole family. Beyond all question, the mystery from which true godliness springs is great. And here's the hymn. He appeared in the flesh, was vindicated by the Spirit, was seen by angels, was preached among the nations, was believed on in the world, was taken up in glory. Amen. Lord, thank you that you have given us your plan for the church, that we don't have to just try to figure it out, but you have shown us this is what I want. This is what I want the leadership of the church to be like. These are my qualifications for them. And Lord, this standard is high, but I pray for Brian and I as the elders of this church, Lord, that we would attain to it. And where we are lacking, God, I pray for mercy, and I pray for grace, and I pray for growth. Lord, and I pray for Greg as our deacon right now. Jesus, I pray for him that you would give him grace and power to attain to the qualifications that you expect of him. And Lord, again, for him too, where he falls short, that you would show him mercy, and that you would show him grace and grow him. And Lord, I pray for others in our church, though we are small, Lord, I pray that you would raise up more deacons, raise up more elders. Lord, we still want to plant other churches, and we want to plant other churches. We're going to need more elders to pastor those churches. We're going to need more deacons to help facilitate the practical matters of the church. So Lord, raise up people within our church that give them a vision a greater vision for their life where they could see it and go, yeah, I could be a deacon. I could do that. I could be an elder. And Lord, raise them up in our ministry so that we can plant other churches. And so this church can function better. Pray for each one of us, whether we feel a call to be a deacon or an elder. Lord, I pray for each one of us to aspire to these qualities, these character qualities, and that we would reach them, Lord, that your grace would be on us, your power would be on us. Root out selfishness, root out anything of the world in us, anything of the flesh in us, so that we attain to the stature that you have for us, God, that we would look more and more like Jesus, walk more and more in your love and your maturity. In Jesus' name, amen.